All right. I'm officially talking to myself on the interwebs once again. And I wanted to showcase what is one of my favorite books, um, Beyond the Promised Land, The Movement and the Myth by Professor David F. Noble. And I like talking to myself, so not really, but on the internet, sure, I can talk to myself. And now I can even read to myself. So you can see there's promo quotes on the back by Noam Chomsky and Vad Vadana Shiva, or as my colleague insisted, it's Vandana Shiva. But I've heard everybody else call her Vandana Shiva, so I'm sticking with. Hello, I'm just discussing this book that I thought I had lost it. It was in the car, and I found it, and I realized, like the prodigal son, valued it much more since I realized I'd lost it. I had read it originally at the community college library where it was in stock in Minneapolis, and that was about, I don't know, 20 years ago or something. Let's see what year it was published, actually. This is five, not 20 years ago. This is such a great book. Well, first of all, it's a small book, and so it's really fun to hold it because you can hold it and hold it open and read it like that. So it's more like a pamphlet than a book. Like, you know, you can spread the pages apart with one hand like that. And so that makes it super comfortable to read. And that's important when you're reading a book. It's easy to turn the pages because they're only half page size. This book is signed. Haven't looked this name up. Norman Gotwell. Thank you for selling your book or donating it and letting me buy it used. So there's an interview with Professor David F. Noble about this book, and basically he goes through. He's sort of like Western as a whole. Starts out the book had this sense of linear time ever since um, this creation of the Promised Land. This idea of the Promised Land, where you had like a religious philosophy. I mean, he identifies it with Judaism. I mean, Jewish, but it's more like I would describe it as Platonic Hellenization of Judaism, I would think. Um, and then you have to throw in Zoroastrian philosophy. Like if you read Norm Cohn's book, he talks about, I think his book's called Chaos and the World to Come or something like that. And that's about how the idea of linear time really developed with the Zoroastrians. So um, I'm just okay. He mentioned Zoroaster, and does he mention Cohn? No, he doesn't have a bibliography, so it's not like a totally academic book. Because if it was totally academic, it's more like an essay because he doesn't really have footnotes. But of course, he's going through all of history, so he just kind of covers like prominent thinkers. Right now, I'm on Hegel. He just got to Hegel, and um, so he's getting into Marx, and the idea is where you have constant your time where you're trying to create perfection on earth where history is self-fulfilling as a sort of religious combination of technology and self-fulfilling history, self you have history, technology, and religion all combined as Western civilization. And this book is really a follow-up of his previous book that was called The Religion of Technology that I used to kick off my master's thesis. In that book was published in 1996, so my master's thesis was in like 2000. Um, so I'm not sure what year he passed on, but he refused to use email because he also had a book on automation, how teachers were being replaced by automation. And I mean, he was a critic of technology from his job as professor of history at MIT, which is of course a big technology research institute. And so he got kind of in trouble with that. He didn't get his tenure at MIT, and he filed a lawsuit that was backed by the American Historical Association. He was fired for political reasons because he did a lot of exposés on the elite education, higher education in the U.S. through these elite think tanks. The audio's not perfect. It's not supposed to be perfect. That's the whole point of my talk, is that technology is never perfect. Only the meditation is perfect. Here, let me look up my settings. I'm sure it's on sound settings. Yeah, my sound's turned up. Oh, okay. Can you hear me better now? I had my headphones in, so does that work better? Testing, testing. Is it worse? Worse or better? I'm gonna assume it's better, unless you tell me it's worse. Here, I'll type it. Okay, so it's better. Cool. Thanks for that feedback. Alrighty, so just to repeat, I'm just reviewing David F. Noble's last book. And yeah, I had my headphones plugged in. I'm a Luddite, which is actually perfect for the book of this book. He had a exhibit at the Smithsonian on the Luddites, and the Smithsonian actually canceled his exhibit. He had one of the original hammers that the Luddites used to smash the machines, and the exhibit was just a critique of automation and how technology is kind of like evil. Sorry. Obviously, I'm just doing this on the fly. But okay, so now the book we're getting in spiritualization. Let's see if I can read the book. Here we go. The Carolinian spiritualization of the productive arts was coupled with the invention of a vocabulary unavailable to Augustine. This new language. So that's where his first book, The Religion of Technology, is all about that. In the 9th century, it's about John Scotus Erigena, I don't know, Erigena, but basically relying on Platonic philosophy that he got from the Muslim scholars, the Moors. Here we go, John Scotus Erigena. Let me see if I can see what I'm doing here. Erigena's notion that the mechanical arts were linked to the divine was illustrated in Benedictine iconography. Iconography. Never said that word. iconography. So so the whole idea is that you have um deep structural religion of technology that developed in the West. And obviously, you find this where in education, where people get an education with the idea of making more money. And of course, that relies on technology. And then you have this psychological denial about the side effects of technology, which are causing the ecological crisis. And people ignore it because the media ignores it because they're relying on advertising. And so then, unless you're making money, then you're considered to be uneducated. And then, so if you nobody studies ecology because there's no money in it. So it's like this circular feedback. So, um, okay, so moving right along, I'm just going to try to speed read this to the juice. He gets into the Royal Society. So then he starts moving into like Freemasonry and the connection between basically Freemasonry is basically Platonic philosophy. So you don't even have to rely on the whole like secret society stuff because you have to realize that the real problem in politics is actually the Platonic philosophy is this sort of like divine trying to create a promised land on earth where everything's perfect with technology and at the expense of ecology and trying to, be in denial that we're not part of nature. And so they have the he's talking about right here God the have the he's talking about right here God the great architect. Adam so basically equating Adam with God the great architect with Freemasons. And so modern Freemason law. Okay, so that's basically you have that with the golden ratio, and you'll find this in the New Age community. I would find these New Age books where they're talking about we need to replace nature with the golden ratio, and and it sounds crazy, but basically that's what the Pythagorean theorem is too. Is that um you know, irrational magnitude? So you're trying to plumb and level it. Anybody getting a building permit, they have to, use a laser level or some kind of speed square or whatever, and try to make everything flat and and plumb, and it goes against basic truth of Mother Nature. Okay, so like John Locke, he wrote the constitutions for the Carolinas in the US. So like one of the earliest constitutions, and he said you cannot have contracts with the Native American, quote unquote, improve the land. And if you're not improving the land, then you're not sovereign. And so the whole definition of being a sovereign is based on Platonic philosophy. And so now it's like illegal to live on your land unless you're, improve it. You can't live on it year round as a permanent dwelling, or otherwise the government will literally like kick you off your own land. So it's not just like theoretical stuff. So then he gets into the ties it into the development of free market ideology, and how the economy became essentially just an extension of this physics as a Platonic. It's religion of the free market, and um, with Smith, and we'll keep going here. I don't know what I'm gonna find because I haven't read this book in almost 20 years, and I read it in the library, so I speed read it the first time. So he's talking about the poor laws, which is pretty much what I was just talking about. Um, like we have a homeless crisis right now. They got rid of all the skid rows because people you used to have what they called room room quarters. Instead, you'd have a single room occupancy and you'd share the bathroom and kitchen. And they're basically like, well, we can't have that because we got to make more money. We got to make a profit on commercial real estate. So we're gonna just destroy all that stuff in progress and clean everything up. So then all of a sudden you have this huge spike in homelessness, and they're like, "Oh, those people are lazy." Well, no. So now he's talking about the Corn Laws, which of course led to the famine in Ireland. Um, and I don't, obviously the details of that is complicated, so I can't really get into that unless I read all the nitty gritty. Then he gets into the Communist Manifesto, and one of the great things about David Noble is he's willing to critique um, Marx because he has this great quote from Marx calling it the Edenic respites of technology, and I use that quote in my master's thesis. So basically, he's exposing Marx is just based on Platonic philosophy, just another Platonic philosopher. Um, and of course, you find that problem where sure, to steal the food from the peasants in order to feed the cities, and then try to impose these collective mass. Basically, they try to install economies of scale on the farm in Western Platonic technology. And there's a great book called The Wall Street and the Russian Revolution. So, Russia was relying on book called The Wall Street and the Russian Revolution. So, Russia was relying on Western investment to uh, build up industrial farming system. But in the meantime, you had massive famine, and then it got worse in China when they did it in China. We're talking like 20 million people or more that starved. Um, and that went right into the 60s. Like the Qigong master I studied with, he was forced, his family had like automatic weapons pointed at them, and they were imprisoned because they managed a mine. They managed some kind of factory. I think it was a mine or something. And so they were considered bourgeois. But then, so he was forced into farm labor in the countryside, for I think 2 years. And he had injuries from that because it was horrendous conditions. But that's where he also started learning a little bit more about traditional Chinese medicine. But that's where he also started learning a little bit more about traditional Chinese medicine, because you'd have these. That's what they relied on in the countryside. But you, you know, that and what do they call it? The leap of progress, the Great Leap in China. So it was going right into the 60s, and now you have this westernization that's globalized, and now it's this like global ecological crisis. And so let's see, he gets into, basically he's going over colonialism, joint stock companies. He gets into Jevons. So there you have the Jevons paradox right there, where they talk about how these supposed advances in technology that supposedly increase efficiency, they just cause people to use their money otherwise. Like if they can save money through certain technology, then they're just going to spend it on other stuff, and then you end up growing whenever you grow the economy, you're just in the energy use. And so to maintain a steady, whenever you grow the economy, you're in the energy. And so to maintain a steady GDP, which is the goal of classical economics, you have to increase your energy use. And that's sort of like Jevons paradox on a deeper level based on the entropy of the economics. Oh, he even mentions Charles Steinmetz, which Steinmetz was he was a socialist. I didn't know that, but he was the guy who translated Tesla's inventions into mathematics. And anyway, so then he gets into the railroads and um, the rise of corporate capitalism, um, corporate personhood. So this is where he's talking about the U.S. The U.S. was really okay. It's probably a volume thing because my I'm kind of mumbling sometimes and then talking too loud. Um, so you have this right here where his point is that the U.S. was founded as this basically like a based on this same philosophy of the promised land where the founders were identifying the Israelites. So you had it was whether it's Freemasonry or Christianity or they just saw this where they have to improve the land, and of course it's based on genocide of native people, and but then he gets into the corporate personhood. Oh, can't understand anything at all. Well, let me change my microphone. Choose my outdoors. All right. Wait a second. I'm going to change the microphone. Choose the input device. Test, 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 test. Yeah, it should be working. Test, test, test. I think it's just in the book on, so that's messing with the sound. Comments about the content instead of just the format. I'll keep the book down here and I won't look at the screen, and maybe the sound will be better. So now I'm near the end of the book. I'm about 6 way through. And he's just saying how you had this big corporate campaign against regulations. And of course, we know that's well done. Remember, he was a part of the Reagan administration, and he's basically just said, we got to go on the offensive against any kind of regulations of corporations. And of course, that's still going on with the fascism, with the Trump. And so the final chapter is about what happened before this whole thing was created. And so he goes back to like Sumeria and the original Gilgamesh epic. And his whole point, he starts off the book with the Epic of Gilgamesh and saying how it originally had a different meaning in Sumeria, but then after Babylonia, it got changed when the story of Abraham and the Garden of Eden was basically like an inverted meaning of the original Gilgamesh story. And now we know this from yoga. If you read the divine what's it called? It's Sri Yukteswar. I have his book. I think it's called The Divine Science, and he gives the yoga meaning of the Garden of Eden, and where he says the tree of life is the Kundalini energy, and the tree of knowledge is basically like the third eye. And so originally, you're supposed to harmonize the tree of life with the tree of knowledge, and that's how you recreate the Garden of Eden. Um, so in that sense, we're dealing with the deep. Religion is really like left brain. It creates a left brain dominance. It cuts the brain. It cuts off our subconscious from our spiritual awareness, which you which you access through like a deeper musical meaning. And so he doesn't really get into that, with the Sumerian um, mythology connected to music ratios, and that's only in the work of Ernest McLean, he gets into that. Of course, he's promoting the Platonic philosophy also, but he at least acknowledges that there's this secret use of music, the mythology of the ancient city states in Samaria. So, so basically, the last chapter he talks about this counter trend in Western civilization where they're trying to counteract the Platonic philosophy, and he gets into Bakunin, the anarchist Bakunin's critique of Western culture, and so Bakunin, he was like I think he was a Russian anarchist. And what else? Nietzsche and Henry Bergson, Kropotkin, who was another anarchist, Emma Goldman, the Luddites, Paul Lon. I read his book, The Great Transformation. That's an excellent critique of economics. And he's just talking about communes, um, existentialists, George Orwell. Um, let's see what else. The left critique of Marxism in the 60s, Franz Fanon, the Wretched of the Earth, which I think he was from Tunisia. Um, no, Algeria. And what else? So the he's basically saying the epic Gilgamesh was based on accepting limits of humanity as part of life on Earth and the mortal condition as kind of like a existentialism, and embracing limits and therefore having more like a circular definition of time instead of a linear definition of time. And so for with this circular definition of time, you embrace the now instead of embracing the joy of now instead of fixating on some future perfection of material reality. What came from Platonic philosophy is like material idealism. And so you often hear the word perfect regarding what the standards are in the West. Like people want things to be perfect, is they want technology to be perfect. They and all this, but in fact, that's not going to happen. It's there's not, you know, the only way you can find perfection is not, not in materialistic things. And then he talks about the protests against NAFTA by the Zapatistas in Chiapas, Mexico. Mexico, an example of this, when they basically said "nunca más," which is never more. Like no, ya basta, enough is enough. As this sort of like embrace of the now. It's a lot. It's similar to what Zizek this Zizek argued as this kind of like in if you talk about it in terms of dialectical analysis, it's what they call indeterminate reflection. But it's another word for the void, what I would call the absolute void in Taoist philosophy. He describes it as a crack in history. That was the term used by Marcos, the one of the spokesmen of the Zapatista. So that was way back in 1996. Actually, it started. Yeah, it started right after back in 1996. Actually, it started. Yeah, right after NAFTA, obviously. But so he goes into how that then grew into the protests against the World Trade Organization and the corporate trade agreements that are, get exposed as fake free market, where they're just really just protect big nations. And goes into the Battle of Seattle, which I was at. I was dodging rubber bullets in Seattle. He mentions the rubber bullets here. And let's see. Oh, then the protest in Cancun. My coworkers went down, or no, did they go to Cancun? No, they went to Miami. Um, so so oh, and then he mentions the Students Against Sweatshops. I was part of that movement too. I initiated a campaign at University of Minnesota as part of the Students Against Sweatshops. That took us like a year. Well, it was going. I passed on the two younger women that were helping me out. They took over. Okay, and then the MPERG, the group, one of the PERG groups, Minnesota PERG, they took over that issue too. And it got passed. When I was there, the president emailed me saying, please do not go on unlimited hunger strike. You've done enough already, which is like this patronizing email. But then he did sign to join the workers' rights consortium. So then we had a boycott, a university, like a U.S. boycott against sweatshop conditions in El Salvador. Soon after that got passed. Anyway, back to his book. So he's saying that the separation of church and state actually removed the church from the realm of critical public attention, protecting religion by rendering it a private matter beyond debate. Henceforth, all criticism of religion became taboo in the name of tolerance and individual freedom. And without challenge, religious religion flourished indeed, even in its most fervid forms. But now Bush's restoration of religion in the service of the state, like the theocracies of Israel and Islam, have brought it back into the public arena, exposing it once again to legitimate concern and renewed critique. So this book is very was like ahead of its time. Let's just say almost 20 years ago, 2005. Let's just say almost 20 years ago, 2005. Let's see. In place of the barbarity of the Book of Revelation, in place of the barbarity of the Book of Revelation, the perverse happy ending of the biblical, we will belated return of Abraham from his futile quest for the promised land, and now a life, and perhaps was once written of Gilgamesh in pre-biblical times will now be written here of Abraham. Quote, he came a far road, was weary, found peace. So basically, he's like, all we have to do is flip Abraham around and look at its origins in Sumeria. This is what Michael E. Hudson has been arguing too. Michael E. Hudson, he came out with a book recently on the Jubilee of the ancient economies, where they forgive financial debt every 7 years, and he's arguing that that's the secret truth of Christianity, that in the Lord's Prayer, when they say forgive our debts as we forgive our debtors, that actually was a literal reference to the Jubilee. Where in the Lord's Prayer, when they say forgive our debts as we forgive debtors, that actually was a literal reference to the Jubilee, where the farmers would get their financial debts forgiven because the financial farm harvest is a linear cycle of nature, where you have the land become fertile again and take a break. But obviously the financial debt is exponential growth just based on the mathematics. And so with Platonic philosophy, instead what they did was they made financial debt to be binding, that would not be forgiven, and then they made the mathematics as an applied mechanical arts for Western civilization, and that's what created modern science. And so now you have this like massive ideology where people think technology is going to save us, and then they're in psychological denial more and more about the ecological crisis. And so what was it like DeSantis in Florida where and he's trying to, because there's an obvious crisis in Florida from all the extreme weather, the heat and the hurricanes, but he can't actually be honest about the science of it, so he has to try to create some other technological religion, that some sort of technological fantasies can save us. And so anyway, I'm just gonna leave it at that. Sorry if you can't hear me. I'll listen to it myself. I'm curious as to, what it is. Probably is the fan, because it's hot in here, and so the computer fan is running to cool the computer off. I bet that's messing with the sound. So sorry if you couldn't hear me, and maybe the captions will work. Sometimes the captions work better than the sound. And thank you for letting me speed read this word again, but it's just like a little, like the book is like, it's sort of like the red book. Everybody was supposed to have the red book for Mao or whatever. Like this is like the new little tract that just sort of sums up it like debunks all of Western civilization just right there. So it's a underground classic. And Who got he didn't live much longer after this book was published. But his mentor, Noam Chomsky, is still alive, even though, I mean, they were both at MIT together. Chomsky plugs the book in the back.